Well, our blessings do come disguised, oftentimes, do they not? Yes, they do, and it's such a wonderful thing to recognize. Today is July 20th, isn't it? Yesterday was my father's birthday, and today's my mother's birthday. And I think I shared this one time, but there was someone that I saw from Unity of Fairfax, the church that I grew up in, who came up to me just a couple years ago and asked me how my mother was. She was a teacher at Unity of Fairfax, and so she had been a student of my mother's, and she said, "How's your mother doing?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, she's doing great. She left her body like 20 years ago, but she is cooking. She's having a great time with God." And she was like, "Oh, that's right. You and I are mind beings. Fortunately, we are not, though. You are not your mind. Nor are you necessarily the thoughts that you think, though you are an entertainer of thoughts. And what you do, what I do, often follows the thoughts that we hold in our lives. In this material that we're looking at as we go through the Sacred Abundance, there are what Robin Ryder calls 4 laws of focus. And they're very, very clear, and they're in alignment with what Unity teaches. The first one is that what you focus on, you find. Is that so? Yes. What you focus on, you find. The second one is what you focus on grows. The third is what you focus on seems real. And the fourth is that what you focus on, you actually become. There is a frequency that moves us forward. Emily Cady in Lessons in Truth says this: the appearances are that our bodies and our circumstances control our thoughts. But the opposite is true. Our thoughts control our bodies and our circumstances. Do you remember in the 1990s when Masaru Emoto wrote that book, Messages from Water? Do you remember that? You guys have probably looked at the book and looked at the images. He is a Japanese researcher, and he experimented with the freezing of water molecules, crystalline structures, and how words spoken and words written actually changed the molecular structure. The look of the crystals changed completely from often destructive thoughts, destructive words, disassembled the structures and darkened them and made them look unlike they were in their natural state. All crystalline molecules are made in the image and likeness of God, and so they have this natural beauty. And many have called this a pseudoscience that Masaru Emoto brought because he's been invited to recreate the exact circumstances time and again, as we do with scientific phenomenon. You know, we like to have it proven, and we want to see one of those. Anybody make those science boards that you unfolded and you had a hypothesis and you had to prove it, and people have wanted to see that. Masaru Emoto hasn't brought it to us in that way. And yet the teachings that he shows us, those photographs of what happened in his presentation of the crystalline structures, their beauty and their ugliness, if you will, depending upon what they're exposed to energetically, resonates with us because we know it to be true in the way that we have spoken of ourselves before, and the way we have spoken of others, the way we have thought of ourselves, the way we have thought of others. We see the truth of this kind of teaching. What's beautiful is that when the molecular structure of anything is distorted because of the energy that it's present to or been present to, prayerful energy, holding to the truth, prayerful thoughts and emotions restore the molecular structure. They restore us to the truth. And that is what sets us free. You are actually this invisible activity of God, if you will, constantly expressing. So expressing, being pushed out into the world. from the very epicenter of you, which is the invisibility, or what Paul calls the Christ in you, your hope of glory, that the life itself causes this invisible pressure, and what comes out into visibility comes out through you. And so you and I do have responsibility for the thoughts and the words, even the feelings that we entertain. When they come through that mystical point, and I would call it that, everyone doesn't use the term Christ, you know. Everyone hasn't even been exposed to Jesus on our earth plane. We as Judaic Christians here, first century Christians is what Unity people are referred to as, we absolutely teach the word and the teachings that Jesus brought, and we know that he came as the great example of what you and I are to express in our lives, not the great exception. This and even greater things shall you do. So it's our responsibility to express from that mystical point that he, as he stayed centered in his ministry, was able to express from. It's a promise. And when we express from that mystical point of us, our lives are changed. Our lives are informed with an invisible strength and a power that frees us up from any sense of smallness, littleness, judgment, upset. It's an amazing, amazing thing. Or not. You and I have both, as human beings, come from a place where we're not centering ourselves on Christ in us. And we're not centering ourselves, say, in our Buddhic nature. And we just come. And when we do, all kinds of things happen, and yet at the epicenter of them are the blessings. Sometimes through tears, sometimes through seeming tragedy. And that doesn't change the fact that by returning to the center, which is the divine mind within us, the heart of us, we develop what Reverend Eric Butterworth referred to as the concentric perspective. From the concentric, with the center being the perspective from which we see all things, we know that whatever it is that came into our lives, whatever situation it is that's before us, especially when it's challenging us, and when it causes us great joy, came here so that we will shine. Came here so that we will show up as the brilliant beings that we actually are. That shift in consciousness is a huge shift. It's really a quantum shift. It's going from that sense of being a victim, that things happen to us, and that they come out of something that has nothing to do with us, from being a victim. Anybody here? You don't have to raise your hand, but, have you? Yeah, okay. But, that has nothing to do with me. From being a victim to being a vehicle, recognizing that we actually carry this amazing energy and that we're responsible for it, and then opening up to being a vessel of it. Not a container of it that holds it for ourselves, but a vessel that carries it and shares it wherever we go, that pours and allows that pouring of the living water. Because you, the sense of you, actually exists because you are environed by God. You are a God landscape. It is the divine, truly, in which you live and love and have your very being. Knowing that makes a huge difference. So we don't actually need to try to achieve oneness. Bless you. We just get to take a stand for it. We get to answer the call when it comes. We get to hold to the truth. In Unity, we call that the law of mind action. And it's interesting because it's not actually about what you're saying or what you're thinking. It's about what you are holding onto up underneath that. Because it is true, is it not, that we can be saying something sweet and light and airy, and underneath we're going, isn't that true? And what are we going to get? The universe is listening. What is the universe listening to? It's what we really hold onto. If there's a resentment there, we're going to continue to perpetuate resentments in our lives. It'll come and it'll go. It'll be giving and receiving of that until We allow God to move into that space, and boom, that resentment returns to its native nothingness. It's what we actually hold on to. It's what we sow. It's what we plant. In Galatians 6, verse 7, it says, whatsoever I sow. Negative, positive. Whatsoever I sow, whatever I energetically plant, whatever thoughts I'm really holding, emotion, feelings I really have, I reap. Whatever I sow, I reap. And it's very cool that the universe is designed like that, because we can see exactly. We can see immediately by what we're experiencing, what it is that we're holding on to. And then we have the opportunity to let it go. Robin Ryder says that when we persistently hold a thought, it sends a vibration into the universe, and a matching experience will return into our lives. If we desire abundance, we must ensure that our whole being vibrates at the frequency of abundance, and the universe will respond. Yay, thank you, God. The universe is like this huge transmitter of energy. Whatever energy we put out, we get the results. Isn't it interesting that we have this thought that when we put out the energy, others get the results of that? Isn't that fascinating? If I'm angry, then you're going to have a bad day. Who's having the bad day? When I'm angry. And that's beautiful, because then I get to look at that. The universe is this transmission taking place, constantly listening, constantly responding. Charles Fillmore was, in fact, the co-founder with Myrtle, co-founder of Unity, was the first Christian minister to be on shortwave radio, to be out there broadcasting. And when I grew up in Unity, I thought that was like it, that he was, and I Googled it last night, and they said at least in the Kansas City area, he was the first minister broadcasting. He was a shortwave radio guy. He loved shortwave radio. I know this much about shortwave radio, so I always thought shortwave means it goes from here to here. And maybe that's what he thought, but this was before they had regulations on what you could broadcast and where those bands went and all that stuff. It wasn't governmental at the time. So story has it that he would go out on hot summer nights without his clothing, with his underwear. I don't know what that has to do with the story, but it has perpetuated for years. He would go out, this guy, Papa Charlie Fillmore, and he would broadcast the word of unity. No one around him at all. He would speak with this voice of the divine. He would tell the story of unity and of unific thinking and of inclusive thought, and that all the things that Jesus did were what we came here to do. And he would share this love, this light in the world. And I don't know where he thought people were going to be receiving it, but one day, this huge contingency of people from Africa came to Unity Village in native dress with these beautiful turbans. And they were looking for Papa Charlie, because he had been bouncing off the ionosphere and landing in parts of Africa, and people were listening, and they were being freed up in their consciousness. So we're coming to Unity Village like it was Mecca. Like, we want to meet this guy that's getting out there. And I'm sure he was fully clothed when he met them. To live life abundantly, then, it's like we're tuning into a radio. You know, you've done this. You've done it digitally. You've done it with a little dial. You know the station that you want to hear, the kind of music that you want to hear, the kind of words you want to hear. And so you turn the dial, or you push the buttons, and it hones in on it. You will not get what you want to listen to if you just get close to that, right? You've got to get very specific to it. We have the opportunity to shift the dial on what it is that we want to be giving and receiving in our lives. And there is this God network, if you will, GN station, that is always broadcasting love, that is always broadcasting to everyone, those that can hear and those that cannot yet hear, those that can share it and those that not yet share it. There is a broadcasting of peace taking place. There is a broadcasting of unconditional love taking place. And all you and I need to do, all we're called to do, is dial in our own station. Dial it into that place where we give and receive. Go to the station you want to experience. And how many times we go, you know what, I do not like country music. I'm going to find a classical station, and can't find a classical station, so we go to the country music and just kvetch the whole time. I don't like country music. Why do you have the radio on? Why do you have it on a country station? Turn it to what you want. If what you want in your life is more love, go to the station where you're receiving that love, where you're giving that love. As you give, so you receive. And in that interplay of life, you stay tuned in to a higher frequency, the frequency of the divine within you. This last week, and I really thank you guys, when I left service last week, I said, okay, and I'm not going to be out here. I'm going now to hike on the Appalachian Trail, and everybody was like, yay. And at the back, I want to say, so many people were like, what are you still here for? Why are you standing here? Go now, go. Get on that plane, get out there, hike the trail. And, so on the Appalachian Trail, we started in North Carolina and hiked up into Georgia one day. But the very first day, the rain was predicted. And that was Monday. And it was okay, actually, that day. I wore, my convertible pants, zip-away pants. I didn't think I needed my nylon pants. It looked like rain, but, I'm affirming that it's not going to rain. And, man, it poured. It just poured that day. There was just this time we were walking along the trail, and it was very narrow. It is at parts very, very narrow. We were taking up 2,000 to 3,000 foot elevations each day, descending and ascending in this range of the Appalachian Trail that we were trekking. And so it's very rooted, a lot of roots, exposed roots, a lot of rocks. And so you don't make the same kind of time doing 4.3 miles here in Florida as you do there, in the mountains, needless to say. But there was a moment there when the skies opened and the canopies, over 100 feet above us, and many canopies down, and we're hearing this rain, the thunder, lightning, and we hear it start to come down through the top canopy and into the next canopy, into the next canopy, into the next canopy. And we're thinking, there's not much making it through, until, of course, our hair's soaking wet, and the trail became this river. And now you don't see the roots, and you don't see the rocks, and yet you're called to walk. We walk by faith and not by sight. And so when it was a total deluge, our leader got us together. Jack huddled us. And he didn't just huddle us in an open space where we'd be poured on. He chose to go into a sanctuary of rhododendron, and they were in bloom. And even though it was raining, we could feel the beauty that surrounded us. And under this canopy, this lower canopy of rhododendron, and these flowers that look much like stained glass does in a church, we huddled on the first day, and trust developed. And we were able to see each other more closely than we would have had we just walked in the same direction, looking at each other's backs. God calls us together to experience that higher frequency. And it will happen no matter where we are, with whomever we are with. We get to tune in to a different vibration. In the Appalachian Trail, we tuned into the frequency of mushrooms. Edible mushrooms, inedible mushrooms, poisonous mushrooms. It's all here for us. But to have a parlance with it, to be able to see it, recognize it. The frequency of flowers not seen before. The frequency of ground cover that you would never, ever take the time to look at. But the moment we look and behold God's amazing grace, a whole new level of understanding of how much you and I are supported comes forward. And lichen. I love that it's called lichen because you can lichen. You can pretty much eat all lichen all over our planet. There's only a little percentage that you can't. It's referred to as extreme cuisine. So don't be, picking up the lichen around here and eating it necessarily. But there was one lesson that I felt was really worth sharing, and that was Jack started to talk about this vine. We saw this thick vine. It was probably this thick and at the base. And it went up, and we looked and followed it, and just kept going up and up and up this very tall tree. And then it had leapt at some point in time across the pathway onto another tree. It's foxgrape. And foxgrape, it's called Vitis labrusca. Foxgrape it begins as a vine that's just growing, la-di-da-di-da-di-da. And it doesn't have a lot of strength on its own. Much like you and I don't have a lot of strength sometimes in our lives. Sometimes we even feel weak. What a foxgrape does, and its cleverness, is it notices a plant nearby that's going to become a tree. And it grabs onto the tree. It doesn't take energy from the tree. It just holds on to the tree. It holds on to something that's going to move at a higher frequency, something that's going to lift it up. And that's how the fox vine gets to be hundreds of feet tall. It holds on. It holds on to the truth, like you and I can hold on to the truth and be lifted up out of weakened states of consciousness. Be held up. And continue to go toward the sun. Continue to rise. It opened my eyes. It opened my eyes to kindness that I don't know that I would have seen. To the ability that we have, each one of us, to help each other, extend our hands to one another. And that's what communities of faith are for. There was a guy named Hami and his wife Sid. And they've been married over 60 plus years. The youngest couple on our trip. They had started hiking in their 80s. And they were so cute. They were so 60 years together. And Hami always was in front of Sid. And I would watch Hami get up, sort of, sometimes with difficulty, get up to the top of maybe a root structure. And rather than just think about himself and continue on, he always turned and extended his hand to Sid, his beautiful wife of 60 years. And she always reached out for Hami's hand and let him help her up. You and I are here to help each other move forward. And the energy doesn't come actually in right or wrong. Energy just comes in slower and faster. Energy becomes matter, Einstein teaches us. Energy becomes matter, and matter becomes energy. And so there's this beautiful opportunity for us to declare to the universe, because it's listening, who you are and who you are willing to be as you travel this amazing journey. Thomas Troward says the law of flotation was not discovered by contemplating the sinking of things, but by contemplating the floating of things, which floated naturally, and then intelligently asking why they did so. We float through our lives because we tap into the divine mind. It is that energy that Jesus said, "Lo, I am with you always." The I am presence, God's essence, is always with you. And God, like the internet, it's an interesting analogy to draw, but God, like the internet, can be accessed from anywhere, from any computer, from any mind that will just tune into it. God is omniparticipatory. You don't have a greater spirituality than anyone else. You are fully a spiritual being. You are fully a spiritual being. You are fully a spiritual being. So today, we listen to the words of Charles Fillmore in the book Prosperity. The words of your mouth and the thoughts of your heart are now and always molding the spiritual substance and bringing it into manifestation. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened. And this is the next part of that. For everyone who asks, receives. Exactly in relationship to what you're asking for, what you're holding on to. For everyone who seeks, finds. And for everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. This is the day the Lord has made for you to tune in to God's network and to broadcast it in your life. God bless you.